announcing today that when it comes to Robert Saleh, he is out as the head coach. That move comes after that 2-3 record. They lost the past 2 games, including an ugly 10-9 defeat to the Broncos at 20-36 with no playoff appearances.
I'll be honest with you guys. I woke up this morning expecting some breaking news in regards to the New York Jets. I could have never imagined that this would be the news that I'm about to bring you guys. So before we get to the content, we are less than 50,000 subscribers away from getting to 1 million subscribers. Make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way, we made over $1,000 playing Prize Picks over the past week. We hit on Thursday night and on Sunday, and I would have hit a third time if Aaron Jones didn't get injured. Fortunately, Prize Picks refunds you when a player gets injured. I give away my picks for free on Instagram and now on Snapchat. And make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make a lineup of $5 or more. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I'm gonna be painfully honest with you guys. Coming into this season, I felt like the New York Jets were a huge contender for the Super Bowl. I mean, they literally had everything a team would need in order to get there. They have arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL in Quinnen Williams. They have a top 5 cornerback in Sauce Gardner. They had an up-and-coming edge rusher in the form of Jermaine Johnson, and a defensive-minded head coach with a great track record in running defenses in Robert Saleh. Offensively, they finally got it together. They traded for Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago, and he was returning from an Achilles tear. They have a top 3 halfback in the form of Breece Hall, but they also drafted him some help in the form of Braylon Allen. The wide receiver core is stacked, believe it or not. They had Garrett Wilson, who has always been able to fill up the stat sheet no matter who his quarterback was to start his career. They went out and signed Mike Williams, who had a history of injury issues, but whenever he plays a full season, he is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. And so far, he's been healthy. They also went out and got some additional offensive line help. They drafted Olu Fashanu, but they got one of the greatest left tackles of the 2010s in the form of Tyron Smith. There's no question about it. This team was supposed to contend for a Super Bowl. Robert Saleh was supposed to handle the defense, and for the most part, it seemed like Aaron Rodgers was supposed to handle the offense. Why do I say Aaron Rodgers is supposed to handle the offense? Because despite Nathaniel Hackett being one of the worst offensive coordinators for the New York Jets last year, the Jets decided to keep Nathaniel Hackett. And since Nathaniel Hackett left the Green Bay Packers, he hasn't really had the greatest reputation in regards to his offenses. The only thing that he has going for himself is the fact that Aaron Rodgers really likes him.
Look, that's the number one thing. There's nobody in the building that brings me more joy or is more fun to be around than Nathaniel Hackett. Hack has been a really important part of our culture change and a part of our success on offense. I love him. Hope he doesn't go anywhere. Unless I do.
But the excuse was that Nathaniel Hackett had Zach Wilson to work with last year. He didn't have Aaron Rodgers, and Zach Wilson didn't have that much success with Mike LaFleur as his offensive coordinator. So I guess Nathaniel Hackett got a pass last year. This year, the Jets offense once again has been anemic. And again, this is despite the plethora of weapons that they've had. But for some reason, the Jets didn't feel like it was Nathaniel Hackett's fault for the fact that their offense was so terrible. Because again, Robert Saleh was in charge of running the defense, not so much running the offense. And the New York Jets have the second highest ranked defense in the NFL so far in terms of not only the amount of touchdowns that they've allowed against their team, but also in regards to the amount of defensive yards averaged against them. So Robert Saleh is clearly doing his job here. But through it all, since Robert Saleh is the head coach and since Aaron Rodgers is his quarterback, the blame finger might be getting pointed at Robert Saleh for the fact that the offense isn't working when the offense is solely up to Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. And from the very beginning, we knew something was up. A few weeks ago on national TV, Aaron Rodgers refused to hug his head coach, which is fine if you don't want to hug your head coach, but he literally shoved Robert Saleh off of him. And I didn't really give that too much attention because I thought it was a coincidence. And of course, Aaron Rodgers is definitely a fairly eccentric dude. feud. But then Aaron Rodgers decided to call out his head coach in a post-game press conference.
Robert said that might be something you guys have to dial back a little bit. Is that something you think could potentially help the situation?
It's one way to do it. The other way is hold him accountable.
But it's really strange that Aaron Rodgers is pointing the blame finger at his head coach for the fact that the offense isn't working. Because if this was an offensive-minded head coach, if this was Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, then I would get it. But this is a defensive-minded head coach, a defensive coordinator that got elevated to a head coaching position. You don't typically see a defensive coordinator that gets elevated to the head coaching position being involved in offensive affairs at all whatsoever. But through it all, if you take a look at the New York Jets so far, they have the same amount of points through week 5 in years 2023 with Zach Wilson under center and 2024 with Aaron Rodgers under center with an improved wide receiver core and Breece Hall and a better offensive line. So the New York Jets are hoping that Davante Adams could come in and save them, but the thing is, following their loss to the Vikings in London, Adam Schefter thinks Davante Adams to the New York Jets is in jeopardy.
Do we think that a wide receiver is going to solve the issues that this team has been having? So I don't view that game and that result as making it more likely that the Jets would trade for him.
I just think it's so funny that the offense is struggling and the New York Jets ownership, or maybe Aaron Rodgers, which I don't think the Jets are going to admit that Aaron Rodgers had something to do with this, but I personally think that Aaron Rodgers had something to do with this. But in any case, I find it very comical that since the Jets offense is struggling, the solution to this is, let's fire the defensive-minded head coach, despite us having a top 2 defense. And that's exactly what the New York Jets did. So according to Adam Schefter, ESPN sources, the Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh. So funny because on the flight home from London, Robert Saleh was probably like, "Don't worry, Aaron, we'll figure it out." And Aaron Rodgers probably said this.
We? Who's we? There is no we.
But immediately, Jordan Schultz mentioned that Aaron Rodgers wasn't involved in this, saying that Robert Saleh's relationship with Aaron Rodgers was not fractured, despite speculation. The two were getting along. The firing of Robert Saleh was carried out solely by Woody Johnson this morning. Yeah. Sure. If you take a look at the beginning of the season, which I don't care that Aaron Rodgers refused to hug his coach, but I personally thought that was strange because if you look at head coaches that Rodgers got along with in the past, like Matt LaFleur, they had some very romantic situations. But Aaron Rodgers has a history of throwing his head coaches under the bus. I mean, well, it was mainly one other head coach that he played for, and that was Mike McCarthy, the only head coach that he won a Super Bowl with. And he was very vocal about his disdain for Mike McCarthy. Jordan Schultz continues to say, sources, Robert Saleh came into the building today business as usual. The decision of him getting fired was a surprise and it came directly from ownership. Defensive players in the building are shocked by it. Interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich is loved in the building and will take over, but this was a stunner to many in the building. I honestly think this is a huge step back. And if this truly had nothing to do with Aaron Rodgers, then you should see the offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, get fired because it's the offense that's struggling. It's not the defense that's struggling. The defense is doing well. You're tinkering with something that is probably the biggest strength of the team. I think this is a horrific mistake personally. And I don't really think trading for Davante Adams is the 100% solution to this. I mean, yeah, maybe the chemistry with Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers could fix all of this. But to be honest, if you look at the New York Jets, they have a very solid wide receiver core. I mean, the fact that they haven't been able to figure this out isn't Robert Saleh's fault, in my opinion. But Ari Meirov makes a very interesting point. New York Jets are in a situation where they could beat the Bills on Monday Night Football in Week 6, move into first place in the AFC East, trade for Davante Adams, and eventually bring Hassan Reddick into the fold. There's a scenario where this all blows up. The Aaron Rodgers experiment becomes one of the biggest failures that the NFL has seen in a long time. It's just insane when you take a look at Aaron Rodgers' tenure with the New York Jets. I mean, year 1, he tears his Achilles tendon, and Zach Wilson is thrusted back into the fold. Year 2, he has his head coach fired in the middle of the season, so he has an interim head coach take over, and then year 3 is probably going to be his final year. And obviously, we're going to have some fun photoshopping Bill Belichick into some New York Jets head coaching gear because it would be the funniest thing ever if the New York Jets hired Bill Belichick, primarily because of Bill Belichick's history with the New York Jets being their head coach for a day and then eventually stepping down. Secondarily, because the New York Jets are in the New England Patriots division. It'd be really fun to see how that shakes out. With that aside, I don't don't know how this fixes things. I mean, yeah, we've seen times in the past where a head coaching change is made in the middle of the season and the team rallies and eventually makes a playoff run, like the 2021 Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, I mentioned this in a lot of my content. They deal with the Henry Ruggs tragedy. John Gruden has some emails leaked, so he has to resign. Rich Bisaccia, the special teams coach, gets elevated to head coach. Next thing you know, Derek Carr has the best season of his career, throwing for over 4,800 passing yards, leading the Las Vegas Raiders to the playoffs. And of course, the Raiders decide not to bring Rich Bisaccia back as their head coach the year after. But in my opinion, this was pointless. There was no reason at all whatsoever to fire Robert Saleh when the defense is clicking on all cylinders. I don't think this solves anything, primarily because Nathaniel Hackett is still the offensive coordinator over there. He's clearly failed despite having the right pieces on offense, and the only reason he's still there is because Aaron Rodgers likes him. But if you're a New York Jets fan, I want you to let me know in the comment section down below, how do you feel about this? Do you think Robert Saleh was holding your team back? Do you think there's something that I'm clearly not acknowledging? Do you think the team's wide receiver core is terrible and they need Devontae Adams to come in and save them? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.